Anyway, welcome you guys. Good morning. Wishing you guys a wonderful weekend. It's my privilege to be the host today. I'm sorry I've not been around for the last 2 weeks. I actually came down with a really bad cold. I don't know, this going around is terrible. So make sure you take care of yourselves. So anyway, I want to welcome everyone to begin our time together. Let's just take a moment to close our eyes, center our hearts, and set our intentions for today's gathering. Ethos is a community for men and women offering and embracing people and their stories. We are a value-driven community, caring, helpful, open-minded lives. We come together with specific intentions. First, we come to connect with one another, with ourselves, with those around us. We welcome those of you who are new and invite all of you to become part of our circle of intentions and connection. Second, we come to learn. We bring our beginner's mind into this moment and acknowledge our humility, honesty, teachability. Finally, we come to be together, to be human, to be ourselves, to be kind, by caring, and to be open to all that awaits us in this place today. Amen. So with that being said, we're going to have the privilege of listening to beautiful music from Chanel and her band. And let's just be open with our ears and hearts to receive their beautiful voice and melodies.
So this is Justin and Luigi. They're two of my best friends that I'm so thankful that I get to play with often. And we're going to sing a song for you. And if you know it, please sing along.
Creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born in the vapor of your breath. The planets form. If the stars are made to worship so light, I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so loud, oh, so loud. Don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see heart 8 billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you live your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Hello. Let's do something. Can everyone just come up to the front, like these front spaces? Everyone just come on up. Grab, like, couches are open. Come on up to the front, everybody. That'd be, just be nice. I feel like no one heard me. It's not scary. It's kind of nice, actually, when you're right up front. Yeah. Perfect. How's everybody doing? Good. You can tell it's spring break, isn't it? But I'm thankful we're all here today. I want to start by just posing a question. So I want you to look around at the people you're with, and how do you typically respond when you see injustice? If something has been done to you or someone you love, or even someone you may not even know, you just see it. What is your typical response that just naturally comes out of you? So turn to the people around you and just talk about that for just a minute. What is your typical response? Maybe you have a moment where you saw some injustice. How did you respond? Did you like how you responded? Would you like to change that response? All right, go for it. I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes for that. Long enough for me to grab coffee. Everyone's dropping a phone today is like worse than dropping a baby, I feel like, in our culture. Like, you dropped your phone. Baby will live. You dropped your phone. Yeah. All right. That's good. Anyone quickly just want to say, this is how I typically respond to injustice? Hit me. Saw injustice, a great injustice. It was terrible. What's your response? Just anger. Okay. Confrontation. I'm gonna say something. You talk smack. Good. Venting. Okay, good. You start venting. Okay, you just say, forget it. I'm not even gonna go there. I'm just gonna. Okay, yeah. You want them to become aware. Okay, got it. Got it. You think that's bad? Look, show me what I can do to you. Yeah, that's good. Not good, but yeah, it's what we often do. All right, interesting. So I want to talk about a book that my whole life I grew up with, kind of hating, kind of fearing, never fully understanding. And so this book I'm going to talk about for the next couple weeks, maybe month and a half, is the book of, I'm going to say it like, this is a great way to lose people. Talk about this book. It's a great way to lose normal people and a great way to bring in a bunch of weird conspiracy theorists. So, but I'm still going to talk about it because I think it's really actually pretty cool. The book is Revelation. So, when I say, I just had a couple people go, shoot. Why did we come? Revelation. Tell me your experience with this book. The book of Revelation. Scary. Fear. Confusing. Yeah, you've got like all these weird beasts floating around and, okay. Yep. Mind expanding. Okay, nice. Good. I like that. Fearful. Dark. Okay, good. Loss of hope. Okay, good. Yeah. You're like, man, this whole thing's going to burn like that. Ugh. All right. Perfect. Demonizing certain groups. Ever noticed that? I grew up with a translation, a interpretation of this book that said the whole thing's going down in flames. We're going to point fingers at, now get this, I came from a more Protestant background, so we pointed fingers at the Catholics. Right? And it's interesting, this whole thing started actually, the idea that like the Catholic Church is the beast, because one day Martin Luther said of the Pope, you're a beast, you're the beast, and the Pope turned around and said, well, you're the Antichrist. And that has actually stuck with the Protestants for a very long time. Now the Catholic Church, they quit calling the Protestants Antichrist. They were just kind of like, you know what, you do your thing. We're a lot older than you. We don't have to fight anymore. The Protestants still, there are some sects that still hold on to, like this idea that you're the beast, you're bad, that kind of thing, but very fewer and fewer and fewer as we go, which is kind of interesting. But that's how I grew up with this book, and I remember like hearing about like you had to have your calculator when you read this book, and like your decoder ring. I remember like you had to try to figure out the code, and then you'd have to add all these numbers from all these different texts all over the Bible to make it say certain things. And I remember thinking like, I'm not good at math. This book is terrible. I guess got all my least favorite things. And so that's how I view the book until I started to study the actual context of the book, when I started understanding history, when I started to delve into the real meaning behind the book and why it was written. And so what I want to attempt to do today is talk about how this book actually has nothing to do with like geopolitical predictions about the future, and how it really talks about how to be in a culture, in a place where maybe you don't agree with everything going on, maybe you feel oppressed, maybe there are negative things happening. How do you live free in the middle of that kind of oppression and turmoil? How do you protest something that's not working, but do it in a way that isn't killing, hurting people around you? Yeah? So this is going to be like the way that the punk scene started. Starts underground, right? It moves. It's not really violent, but it has this anger underneath it. But they say, what do we do with it? And what the punk scene does is they create music. And for them, inspiring music. So we're going to talk about what it means to protest in the New Age using a very ancient, misunderstood book. What do you think? It's going to be fun? Yeah. Okay, good. I've done a series before like this, and my hands were pretty tied when I did it. I had to say certain things, always end certain ways. I couldn't fully be honest about the book and what I knew to be true about the book and what I had studied historically. So I'm just going to share without my hands tethered and just be open and honest about it. And here's the other thing. You may not completely agree with everything I say. And of course, if you don't, you're wrong. But I'm totally messing. You may not fully agree with what I say, and that's okay too. Where I land may not be where you land. What serves you on how to view this book may not serve me, but if it's bringing you life, then I think that's pretty great. So let's go. Let's talk about it. Thomas Paine, when he talked about this book, he said this is a book of riddles that requires a revelation to explain it. So you and I are not alone in how we view this book. Martin Luther actually said this book is neither apostolic. I can in no way detect the Holy Spirit produced it. Again, they are supposed to be blessed who keep what is written in this book, and yet no one knows what that is, to say nothing of keeping it. Christ neither taught nor known in it. This was one of the forefathers of this whole Protestant movement. Interesting enough? Yeah. Who is it written by? Many people ask this question. For a long time, we used to believe it was actually John the Apostle who followed Jesus. Most theologians now have moved away from that idea. They've said John is a very common name. It was a very common name. And this John was most likely not the same John you would have seen that was one of the apostles. This John was probably, he wrote it sometime around 68 to 85 AD, somewhere around there. And so most theologians today are saying different John. It was a different Dear John letter. Got it? Cool. Here's what this book is not. This book was never intended to be a puzzle to piece together what future geopolitical events are going to take place. I just said that. I want to hear how that lands for you. This book was never intended to be a book where you piece together certain things to make future predictions. How did that land for you just now? Okay. Okay. What a relief. That's nice to hear. And figures. Why'd you say figures?
Because that's what people do. They use it for power and getting themselves into a direction that is above others.
Okay, interesting. And isn't that interesting that people will use this book to lord over others when the reality is the book was all about learning how to not do that? Ironic, anyone? Yeah, super ironic. Another thing, which you kind of brought up there, is it was never a book that was supposed to scare people into submission. It was never supposed to be a scare tactic that was supposed to frighten children at night. When there were thunderstorms and lightning, they weren't under their bed saying, please, Jesus, don't come again. Right? I'm not ready. No. Children were not supposed to be scared of a potential Catholic Pope and a national Sunday law. By the way, people from the Adventist community, how many of you still get these circulating things about a national Sunday law? It's amazing. It's insane, isn't it? It's so funny. This poor Pope can't do a blasted thing right. If he opened the door for an older woman, it would be like, no, he's going to trip her. He's got something up his sleeve. I remember when he washed the feet of all of those immigrants. I love that everyone had, like, all of these Protestants had something negative to say about it. Oh, it's you just wait. Like, wait for what? Like, what are you? He can't ever do anything right. The book oftentimes was used that way. It is not. That was not the purpose of the book. It's not the purpose. Here's the purpose. The purpose of the book during that time was to offer challenge and comfort, resistance and hope. It was supposed to be a hopeful book that was filled with challenge, how to live differently in this age where there was oppression and turmoil and brokenness. How do we live now? What do you think? Yeah? Another thing it was keeping Christian kosher. And here's what I mean by that. Not adopting certain negative, unhealthy things from other cultures, learning to follow the Christ movement fully. Not adopting the traditions of violence and hate and oppression, but learning to walk fully in the Christ path. That's what it's supposed to do. And next, it's apocalyptic literature. Interesting when... Yes, another friend who has been beaten over the head with this book. Apocalyptic literature, it actually doesn't have anything to do with futuristic predictions. It's about an unveiling. And so apocalyptic literature, and I'll go into this more, is actually, it's mainly metaphor. And so whenever I've read certain people trying to interpret this book, it's funny what they decide is literal and not literal. They'll be like, well, that's a dragon, so we're going to say that's not literal, because I don't see a lot of dragons. But this over here, that's very literal. And they just go back, and then when you ask them, well, how did you decide what's literal and not? Well, we just have to believe. Like, believe what? What we've been told. Bah. Yeah, it's just, that's what I have heard over and over my whole life. The truth is, it is a metaphorical book. It's filled with metaphor and poetry and all of that, and I'll get into it more. Many of us grew up with the idea that a prophet is going to, again, like, go into visions and predict future things. That's not what a prophet did during that time era. Prophecy meant this. It meant sharing messages of comfort and challenge to a present-day people. That's what prophecy was. Had nothing to do with future predictions. So the prophets, Elijah, Elisha, all those prophets, you don't see them like all of a sudden falling into visions and holding up 20-pound books. What they did is, they said, man, things are getting really bad. And here's some warning signs. Like, here's some warning messages. And if we can follow the right path, things could potentially turn around. But here's what we got to do. Ever hear those messages today? Here's what some of the messages today, prophetic voices, sound like. Here's one of them. Water and air, the two essential fluids on which all life depends, have become global garbage cans. Jacques Cousteau. He gave us that warning actually a while ago. And do you know that we have not listened? He talked about, I saw some interviews with him. He said soon the ocean life is going to essentially become non-existent. He said we are just killing what is living in the ocean by dropping all of our garbage in it. And at some point, our kids may not see whales. They'll just see pictures. The seafood you get is going to all come from a can that came from a fake riverbed somewhere someone made, and they're feeding these trout, dead trout, right? That's where we're heading. And Cousteau said, it's not going to be pretty. He is a prophetic voice. Another prophetic voice. He actually, the movie A Monster Calls, beautiful movie. This is in the middle of the movie. It says this, 150 years ago, the monster began. This country had become a place of industry. Factories grew on the landscape like weeds. Trees fell, fields were upended, rivers blackened. The sky choked on smoke and ash, and the people did too, spending their days coughing and itching, their eyes turned forever toward the ground. Villages grew into towns into cities, and people began to live on the earth rather than live within it. These prophetic voices are saying if we don't change how we live on this earth, with the earth, we're not going to have an earth to live with, right? We stopped living with it, being involved with it, nurturing it, and we just started taking and consuming. There's a prophetic voice saying if we don't stop, things might get worse and worse and worse. Will we be able to turn it around? George Orwell talked about politics. He wrote a lot of books with a lot of metaphor in it. And he said, in our age, there's no such thing as keeping out of politics, is there? Would you all agree with that? No matter what happens, somehow some politic is going to get brought up. And politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. It's become, unfortunately, politics, which is supposed to be kind of the processes that help keep us together, it's become a kind of a big mess. And if we don't change the way we do our politics, our government, things could get worse and worse and worse. And again, you and me, the question is, well, what can I do? Right? Because that's the question this early church people were asking. They were saying, well, what can we do? Revelation's going to give us some ideas. I love Terry Crews. He talks about how difficult it was being a black man growing up in Flint, Michigan. And the difference, the divide there really is, whether we like it or not. As a black man in America, you only have a few shots at success. You only have a few chances to make yourself a viable member of the community. I'm from Flint, Michigan. I've seen many young black men who were provoked into violence. They were in prison or they were killed. They are not here. I think those voices often are easy to avoid and pretend they're not there because I don't have to see them. I'm white, I'm middle class, right? For me and for many of you, there are voices that are marginalized that we can oftentimes pretend away, can't we? Or we can attempt to say, oh, it's not that bad, or this or this or this, when the truth is they're right there saying it's really bad. What do we do with these voices? Do we ignore them? Do we listen? Do we attempt to make change? There's some things happening with a movement called Me Too, and it's causing some change. Kate Beckinsale, who is, again, next to my wife, one of the most beautiful women in the world. I was aware that standing up for myself and saying no to things, while it did not allow me to feel uncompromised in myself, undoubtedly harmed my career and was never something I felt supported by anyone other than my family. I would like to applaud the women who have come forward and to pledge that we can, from this, create a new paradigm where producers, managers, executives, and assistants, and everyone who has in past shrugged and said, well, that's just Harvey, Mr. X, insert name here, will realize that we in numbers can affect real change. Isn't that kind of empowering? Those kind of voices are rising up and they're saying we have to have change. And they're doing it in really positive ways. These are our prophetic voices today. These are our prophets. Many of them are celebrities. Many of them are politicians. Many of them are scientists. Many of them are moms and dads trying to figure things out, posting something on Facebook. These are prophetic voices today. They are not these weird mystic people who wear robes and go into weird visions and start talking about future predictions, because it wasn't like that back then. It isn't like that today. How do you feel about that definition of a prophet now?
I think it's helpful because with the biblical prophets, we don't read what they have to say with a grain of salt. We don't even try to look at the context or the culture or say that they're just one voice. We just literally say if it's in the Bible, it must be absolutely true, literally, and then follow that, not realizing that they all have their own biases, their own culture, their own understanding. You know, John does seem kind of anti-female if you read.
For sure, yeah.
And that's just part of his culture. You know, I think so. God speaks through people, even through someone like that who sees visions like that. It might be, you know, kind of chauvinist when it comes to women, but God can still speak to them. But we don't need to buy into their, you know, them being anti-women as part of God's message. You know,
Right.
God speaks through people, even if they use bad grammar or write typographical errors. And I say that because in the book of Revelation, right, the New Testament scholars are embarrassed how poor the Greek is in the
Very
book of
embarrassed.
Revelation. They said, how could God have written it? Why didn't God choose someone who is practically illiterate, right? But God uses all kinds of people, and we kind of take them where we find them and glean from them the truth that God wants
Beautiful.
us to find, not thinking that it's kind of a literal transcript of God speaking to us.
Right, yeah. That's one of my favorite moments about the Old Testament when you have the Ten Commandments given. There's this movie called The Meaning of Life. No, The Book of Life. Is it The Book of Life? History of the World. Why couldn't I say Book of Life? I'm getting it confused with the cartoon. Yeah, The History of the World. There's a moment where you see Moses carrying these 3 tablets. And he's like walking down to go see the people. And I guess like God had inscribed with his literal finger. And Moses gets up there, he says, I have these 15, and he drops one. He's like, 10 commandments. This is so funny. We take it, we tend to take it so literally, but we forget these were real people. Today, there are far more than 10 commands or 10 principles we live by, and thank goodness that's the truth, right? And that's why, again, the prophets, they don't always agree. You have many different prophets, one saying, kill everybody, the other being like, no, kill no one. Actually, love your neighbor. You have all these different prophetic voices who are oftentimes in disagreement. So that's also interesting. So today we're going to talk about voices of protest. Here are the questions that this book is going to answer. How do we respond to a system that's become toxic? What path brings us the most change, right? Will the beastly empires of the world always win? Will the bad guys always, will they always keep winning, right? What do you do? What do people like us do when we just feel like we're just getting smashed over and over? What do? I have to pay this much taxes, and look at this guy over here, right? It doesn't seem right. What do we do when the bully seems to win? That's what this book is going to answer. It's going to say nothing. We're not going to talk anything about predictions in the future. Is that okay with you? Perfect. Here's what's going on in that book. Two groups think this is what's going on, and they kind of go back and forth. But basically, the book is either written during the time of Nero or after Nero during Emperor Domitian's time. So it's either around 67-ish or around somewhere around 88 to 94. And so under those two different groups, you've got Rome is basically being governed by Nero or Emperor Domitian. Interesting thing about these two is they both, most emperors actually had virgin births. Most emperors called themselves the title the Son of God. Most of them healed people, the stories say. Most of them demanded worship. What do you find interesting about that with these two? Did I just say anything that you like, oh, wait, what? On many of their like coins and things, you would find often you would have Son of God, Son of Man sometimes. You would often have them wearing certain outfits that looked like the gods. And almost every single one of them, when they died, guess where they went? Anybody? They went to Olympus, where they were with Father Zeus. Interesting, right? So all of them had resurrection stories. So these leaders, both of them could potentially be at the time when John is written. Most authors I find interesting. I obviously am going to push one or the other. I think it's probably Domitian, looking back, and he actually brings up Nero quite a bit. The name Nero, guess what his title was to the common people? The nickname they gave Nero. This is going to blow you away if you grew up as an Adventist, because historically, most historians know this. Nope. They called him the Beast. It's one of the most common things you can read when you read about Nero. Take like 20 minutes and read a book under Nero. You will find the nickname the Beast over and over and over again. Yeah. Interesting, right? He was the Beast. That's what they called him. So when you're reading the book of Revelation during that era, all of these interesting political cartooning and images and metaphor and all of that, they would have understood. Today, we're like, the Beast. Who's the Beast? Well, it's either the Pope or it's who else? If I'm a Christian, it's the Pope. If I'm a Catholic, maybe I'm looking at like, I don't know, name some Christian evangelist. Joel Osteen. There you go. He's a beast. Yeah, but back then it was very common. That's who they were. And so, again, apocalyptic letter, here's what it was. They used symbolism, cryptic language, political cartooning, poetry. That's what apocalyptic literature was. How many of you have ever seen political cartooning in like on Facebook, those little comics, or even in a newspaper, if anyone even reads those anymore? Have you seen those before? Funny cartoons. And usually they're kind of like a slap in the face a bit. Or anyone ever watch John Oliver or any of those shows? The Daily Show, any of that? This would have been right along in that line. So when you're reading the book of Revelation, you're really watching, or you're really reading something that we would see today as like political cartooning, making jabs at the political system that's not working, but then finding healthy ways to make change. Cool?
That idea is not, you just said, is it, I guess, a common belief, is it?
When you begin to,
Actually, what you're saying is that it's not.
right,
That just kind of seems common sense to me, because I didn't grow up
right,
in the church, but that statement right there, you just kind of made it sound
yeah.
but that would be
This would be earth-shattering to someone that came from a certain sect of religion. Now, truth be told, most Christian churches are even moving away from literalism. I think they really are. Most are beginning to understand apocalyptic literature meant that. There are still some tribes that are very much holding on to some of those older things, especially when you have one person being used to say certain things because they wrote a couple books. Yep, okay. This book is basically a bunch of letters to churches. And so people during this time period, when they got this book, which was basically just a bunch of letters, right? What would happen is they would come together with about maybe half of this group. And what would happen is most of you would have been illiterate. And so one person who was literate would pick up this letter from John and he would read it to you. So again, imagine us sitting together and I'm just going to read the whole 22 chapters, right? It wasn't in chapters back then. I'm going to read all of that to you. It's a long, long time. So they would break it up. But they would sit together and they would read it to the illiterate people in their group. And so it's interesting that the 7 letters, they actually follow the mail postal system. And so it goes, the reason they're in the specific order is, well, it follows how someone would have given that mail. You go to Ephesus, Smyrna, you guys get it. And so the letters basically, these are going to be meaningful for the people there, and it's going to address certain things about them. So that's another huge perspective that I want you to know before we delve in. Another thing, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Hillsong United was not around during the first century. Like, might surprise. I know. You're like, what did they do? Here's what they didn't do. They didn't actually like worship what we know of worship, like singing songs, raising your hands, that kind of thing. This is a new idea, and I'm not knocking it, but it's a new thing. This came more from a Roman, like Greco-Roman idea of how to give the gods praise, and they would have worship music. And so the Christians came along and they said, that's interesting. We will adopt that. And so what you see, though, is in this first century, worship was not, they didn't come together and sing songs, which I love the songs that we do. I think it's kind of a cool thing that we've been able to do. But that's not what worship meant back then. Cool? Here's what worship meant. When I said, I worship you, I'm essentially aligning myself with you. My beliefs are aligned with your beliefs. I stand with you. So the question is, who is worth standing with? Is it worth standing with Domitian or the teachings of Jesus? Who do you stand with? Do you guys get it? So a question I might ask you right now is, who do you find yourself, and this will be kind of fun because I love that no one in here is going to have the exact same answer. Politically, religiously, what else can I say? Scientifically, blah, 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 blah. All the leads you can think of. Who do you find yourself aligning with most? What voice right now do you find yourself aligned with, worshiping? Whose voice? My voice. Good. Jesus' voice. Okay, good. Who else? There's certain voices in this culture I have a feeling that you probably align yourself with. Yep. Dr. Jordan. Okay, I was waiting for that. Good. Dr. Jordan Peterson. Who? Jay Shetty. Okay. Nice. Beautiful. Anyone else? You're all just like, I don't read. I go home and I just eat. Yep. And again, musicians, that's great. There's certain musicians and their voices that you might be connecting with. Yeah, so which voices do you align yourself with? Because that's essentially back then, you would say worship, worthy of allegiance to, or with, connection. So that's where this came from. Is this kind of slapping anyone in the face or being like, ooh, is that interesting? Yeah, so the question is the way of Jesus worthy of aligning yourself with, or the way of Rome? That's the question. And so I'm going to dig right in. We're actually going to read some of this together. This is a revelation, and now I want you to notice something. Oh, where are my bolded words? Oh, okay. Got to work on this. All right, so this is a revelation from, should be bolded, Jesus Christ. Now, if you've ever read this book before, there are different translations, aren't there? Because one other translation says what, David? This is a revelation of Jesus Christ. And so many people will go back and forth, and there's this whole movement of people who will say, like, it's all about the character of God. And this is what that book is about. But this book is really not about that. It's not about the character of God. Sorry. It's not what they were talking about. Here's what this word, this phrase was. This is a revelation from Jesus Christ. It is a message from Jesus Christ. We are going to read what the message of Jesus Christ says and how it makes us better people in the middle of marginalization, oppression. How did that land for you? Because we're pretty sure we read the Gospels. We understand who he was, right? We read a lot about him, and that's good. But this book is not going to reveal him. It's going to reveal the message from him. Yeah? Good. This is a revelation from Jesus Christ. And again, watch this, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. Okay, so watch this. What year is it? Maybe 85, maybe 68, whatever. What year is it now? 2019. Anyone having trouble still like writing the 19 instead of the 18? Every day. Give or take, you're close to about 2,000 years is what we're looking back on. Give or take, depending on where you fall with this. That word soon, especially if you're like a 6 literal day creationist and 2,000 years and you believe it was 6,000 years, you're looking at a third of the world's time, like mankind's time here. That's not very soon. If this is a futuristic prediction, pointing forward, soon would not apply, would it? No. Soon would be laughable now because soon didn't happen. But here's the thing. For the people during that time period, it did. It does. And it continues. That's the beauty. It will soon take place. So everything, I'm going to blow your mind for a minute. And I just want to see how this lands for you. Everything in Revelation will take place for the people reading it. It says it's going to happen soon. How do you feel about that? If I said this in a different group, I would be crucified, by the way. Right? Willem? Okay, good. Good, yes. It happened, and it happens. You will see a cycle. Thank you. You will see a cycle, and it will happen. But you'll see this over and over and over again. Every time there's an empire, every time there's a group of people who have power, you will see this cycle happen over and over again. It just does. Jesus says it's time to break the cycle. We haven't quite broken the cycle, but we've found some beautiful ways to move in freedom in the middle of it. Good? Yeah, this is so fun. Okay. All right. Man, I just enjoy this. This is so good. This is his report of the Word of God and the testimony. Again, notice that, the testimony of Jesus Christ. It is the testimony. It's the words. It's the message of Jesus. And again, I find the Christ message over and over again in many things I read today. But God blesses the one who reads the words of this prophecy. Remember the word prophecy, messages of hope and challenge, to the church. A church being small communities of people, not mega churches filled with thousands and thousands of people, but actually really tiny little groups of people filled like in homes. That's what the church was then. And he blesses all who listen to its message and obey what it says. For the time is what? Near. Not 2019, but like happening soon for them. Okay, cool. The letter is from John to the 7 churches in the province of Asia. This would have been like Turkey today. So again, this was a message that would have been very foreign to you and me today. It happened at a different place, different time, very different culture. Grace and peace to you from the one who is, who always was, and who is still to come, for the 7 Spirit before his throne, and from Jesus Christ. Anyone beginning to be like, oh, there's a lot of weird things going on there. 7-fold Spirit is and was and is to come, all of that. Sounding a little weird? It's apocalyptic literature. It's what they do. They're using cryptic words, 7-fold. Again, 7-fold. The word here means fullness. 7, if you're a Jewish person using that kind of language. Yep. Yep. It's basically saying our way's better. Our way is better than your way. And is like childish and elementary as that sounds, that's going to be the book in many, many, many chapters of this book. Oh, Domitian does it this way. We do it this way. Domitian, here's something funny, and I'll share more of this later, but Emperor Domitian really thought he was God on earth. And so here's what he would do. When he walks into a city, he would have people, he would have a choir of, guess how many choir members? 24. I wish I was making this up. 24 choir members go out before him singing, "Worthy is Domitian, Emperor God." And they would go out and they would sing those songs as they would go into the city. Now, if you wanted to buy and sell, there were these altars set up. And you would light the incense, and you would take that, and guess where you would put that? You'd make a mark that you worshiped. And if you put the mark on your hand, it showed that you worshiped, and you could have commerce with the people around you because you worshiped. If you did not, as a Jew would not have done, or an early Christ follower, you could not buy and sell. Talk to me. Yeah, stop looking for a freaking computer chip, like you weirdos. That happened back then. Are there ways government and other people will try to control or different? Sure, absolutely. But back then, that's what they were talking about. Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, okay. Ash Wednesday, that's fun. So funny. Yeah, different. So yeah, again, this was a message to these groups of people. There were far more other groups to have the letters read to, but the 7 fit the purpose of the cryptic writing, right? 7 churches, fullness, right? The full message. Other groups are reading the letter, just so you know. So it keeps going. I'm going to say something now, and I want to see how y'all read it. He comes with the clouds of heaven, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all the nations of the world will mourn for him. Yes, amen. All right, how many of you grew up with this verse and you had a certain interpretation of it? Tell me. What was your interpretation? Second coming, okay. I feel like you might have even more fun with this one. Okay, good. The whole world, again, anyone ever try to wrap your head around that one? Jesus will come again, and the whole world is going to see him. And you're like, well, what about my friends on the other side? Like, how does that happen? Because even the moon, like the sun, how does that work? Right? Just open your eyes wider, Tony. Flat Earth. Yeah, the flat earthers are like, see? Like, there it is. Proof. I remember growing up questioning this and having people say, well, Tony, it means the television. The television, the phones, right? Everyone, live stream. Jesus is going to be like, I got live stream. Everyone turn it on. Look at the website here. I posted it underneath. Everyone just click there right now, all at the same time. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, good. Y2K, yeah, that had a whole... And then think about this one. So not only is that weird, but think about this. All those who pierced him. So I remember reading this now. Well, what's going to happen? And people would say this with a straight face to me. What will happen when Jesus comes again is he's going to raise all those people that, crucified him. And he's going to be like, in your face. And then he's going to burn them. Talk about love. That fits exactly with the Jesus message of learning to forgive your enemies.
I think John, the author of the book, is giving voice to their frustration, their sense of protest. They're wanting justice, and vengeance was a common form of justice in those days. It was an eye for an eye, and so he saw that, hey, those people who put Jesus on the cross will get what they did to him.
Get what they deserve.
And that's his take on it.
Good. And this is one.
And again, I just think that God uses people and speaks through people, but doesn't necessarily change their whole culture, their personality, and their choice of words. I think we see that Jesus talks about forgiveness and love, and so I think Jesus might have a different.
Yeah. If Jesus actually wrote this book, it would be very different.
He's saying, Father, forgive them, right? He's saying something very different.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Like the unwritten account is Jesus is like, Father, forgive them. You're screwed when I come back. Right? Yep. Yeah, what a helpful message that is. Yeah. Yeah, all the bad people. Karen, are you like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how sad my boyfriend was. Okay. No wonder he has so much baggage. Yeah. Yeah, it's most of us. Yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, this is kind of a difficult picture to swallow. Yeah.
If I just literally read that and don't think about any past experience and take it word for word, and everyone will see him, even those who pierced him. Yay, it's a good thing. Why is it? I'm putting a negative thing on it.
Right. Well, and when you literalize it for a future prediction, and you take the rest of Revelation literally where the world burns and literally rocks crush all of our enemies, this gets to be pretty horrific. Which is why when you understand what John is doing, he's actually borrowing from older traditions of writing. When you want to talk about a change, a shift, a war kind of language, you're going to borrow from the Old Testament. That's what they did. And you're going to use cryptic language. So look, here's what he did. In Deuteronomy, it says, there is no one like our God who rides across the heavens to help you on the clouds of his majesty. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath our everlasting arms, he'll drive out your enemies before you, saying, destroy them. This idea of God, Jesus on the clouds, right, coming down doing these things, this is a very normal image for these Jewish people. Another one you'll find, he parted the heavens, came down, dark clouds under his feet, Psalms. See, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and is coming into Egypt. That language is cryptic, apocalyptic language, talking about when things change. And when things change, there are clouds, and God comes down. You guys see it? That's the language, the borrowed imagery that he's using. Take it literally or not, that's for you to decide. But it is borrowed imagery nonetheless. They're drawing from the past. Also notice this. Who are those people who pierced him? These are basically Jews that he's speaking of. At this point in time, there are a bunch of Jews who have said, we're going to become Roman. We're completely giving up that because, man, this is a whole lot easier. It's a lot easier to be Roman. It's a lot easier to have those values, to not keep Judaism, the Christ path, kosher. So we're just going to join those ranks. And so you'll find over and over again with Paul, he's basically pointing out these are the ones, right? These are the ones that have left. And they're going to see at some point the message of Jesus was actually what brought life. I think John could have said it in a nicer way. But he's using apocalyptic literature. It keeps going. When I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 gold lampstands. And standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man. Notice what phrase is that? The Son of Man. Yeah, because again, Jesus never calls himself the Son of God, does he? He says the Son of Man, which is really beautiful because you have all these emperors saying, I am God, I am God. Jesus says, I'm fully human, and that's a divine thing. I am fully divine, and that's a human thing. Anyone having your head hurt? The phrase Son of Man is a very different phrase than Son of God. It is meaning essentially this. I and you and all of us can believe Jesus when he says the kingdom of heaven is within you, it's around you, it's here. When you see holiness, you don't have to look outside, you can actually find it here. Beautiful? Any questions on that? I feel like people could probably take what I just said a million different directions. Okay, well, I'll leave it there. He was wearing a long robe with a gold sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white like wool and as white as snow. His eyes were like flames of fire. His feet were polished bronze refined in a furnace. And his voice thundered like mighty ocean waves. He held in his right hand, how many stars? Well, of course. And a sharp double-edged sword came from his mouth. His face was like the sun shining at its brightest. Again, if you want to literalize this, what an image. Right? Like, what a horrific image. That's scary. But again, we're talking metaphor. That's what this book is. And so what is this describing? Well, if you're a Jewish person, you're hearing about white hair, wool, you're hearing about polished bronze, you're hearing about the sash, all that kind of stuff. You're beginning to connect with a lot of different connections to the Old Testament. You're seeing Moses. You're seeing the priestly garments. You're seeing the different verses from Psalms of God doing something with the waters at huge moments. That's what you're reading if you are a Jewish person or a Christian person moving into the Christ path. That's what you're hearing. It's not a literal picture, right? It's telling you something big is about to happen. And it ends with this. The seven lampstands are the 7 churches. It begins telling you. That's often what apocalyptic literature would do. The 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. And here's something really beautiful I find about this. If we are churches, if we're surrounded in a group, and I put a candle in the middle, we already found out that it says the Jesus path is the candle in the middle. Now, here's something cool. If the candle's burning right in the middle of us, look at the candle, but what do you see? What else do you see? Shadows. Here, let's pretend. I don't know what to put in the middle.
But the shadows would be behind people. You'd see the faces of the people.
Okay. Yeah. If I had something right in the middle of us right now, I'm going to see Mike and Christy. If I'm sitting over there, I'm going to see all of you.
The shadows are cast behind us.
So if we're hearing about this beautiful picture of the divine and where we look to first before we even step into how to deal with pain and brokenness in our culture, the message is there is a light in the middle, and it's going to cast light on everything. What do you see now? Where do you find the divine? In each other. Isn't that beautiful? We're surrounded in pain and brokenness. It's all around us. There are a bunch of narratives that are telling us the world is going to hell in a handbasket, right? A bunch of narratives that are very negative politically, religiously, socially, all these things. And the letter starts out by saying we are actually surrounded by goodness, if you look close enough. The divine walks in our midst, and that light opens up, and the faces that appear are what? Yours and mine. You want to find goodness, you want to start somewhere, you need to first be united together. And when you can do that, when you can see the goodness in everyone around you, you can see that divine goodness reflected through everyone else, only then can you really start something powerful. But if you can't even see the divine in your neighbor, the people across from you, you have no business attempting to follow this kind of movement and starting any kind of protest. Think about some of the protests in our culture today that didn't work. Yeah. Think about this. What annoys you most about the guy with the bullhorn outside of the concert venue? Bible verses in hand. You're all going down. You're all going to burn. Jesus hates gay people, right? That guy. Why is his message not working? It's not love. Separating, right? Is he drawing people together? No. Yeah. In fact, I would almost argue he kind of draws people together, like against him, right? But a message of love and forgiveness, the kind of Christ message that we have, it actually brings us together and makes us aware of the goodness around us. And I think that's when things can begin. That's when we begin doing really powerful things. I remember I was really angry when I first started this ethos thing. And I had a lot of frustration. And it took me 3-4 months before my messages changed to positive. And I remember just feeling a bit of a sigh of relief, oh, that's kind of over now. And what I found is the people that I was united with, it was a real thing. You could feel it. It wasn't just a group of people just showing up. It was actually we're kind of united in this idea. And what happened was we got more and more people from different perspectives and walks. And we all kind of said, we're united in this idea. Learning to love one another, hear each other's stories. We're surrounded by goodness, and we want that every day of our lives. So there's a story a friend of mine told me. He said he and his community, they met this woman who was working at the hospital, and she would come there every couple days, and she had swollen eyes, and she just looked beat up. And he said, as the chaplain there, he said he would ask her, how are you doing? What's going on? No one really wanted to ask the thing that they kind of already knew, that she was being abused. Every night, being abused, sexually, physically. And so he finally said to her, what's going on? What's going on? And he had the admin tell him, you have to work with her or we're going to have to let her go. We can't have patients see someone like that, which, huge lawsuit. But you need to talk to her. You need to figure it out. She finally told him, my daughter and I, every night are terrified for our lives because we're fairly sure that one of these days he's just going to absolutely crack and he's going to hit both of us too hard. And she said, every night I am scared and I protect my daughter. Sometimes we sleep in the bathtub. Sometimes I wake up because I was unconscious on the floor and I have to clean up the blood because if I don't, he promises he'll hit me again. He said, I have to protect my daughter because I see his eyes on her all the time. She said, I'm scared. And he said he and that group of people at the hospital, what they decided, and through their religious community, he said they decided they wanted to help free her and get her out of that. So they raised some money, and they actually helped her move out while he was gone, out of that place into her own apartment, miles and miles away from where she lived. And she started to get her life back slowly. Things were off and on chaotic. He would show up at the hospital, threaten her. Security guards would have to take him away. It got ugly and uglier, but she was beginning to feel more and more free. And he said they were sitting around the table one day, and he started talking about heaven. And again, this is one of my favorite stories, because my friend loves mangoes. And my friend said, I think when I experience heaven, it's going to be a bunch of ripe mangoes. And everyone started giving their perspective of what heaven is, like riding down giraffes' necks, flying, like weird stuff. And she was the only one that didn't talk. And she was in the corner just listening. And they turned to her and they said, what's it going to be like for you? She got this smile on her face and she said, I'm already there. I'm already there. You want to start a beautiful movement? You want to learn the first step into what it means to protest against a system, a culture, a thing that doesn't work? You want to know how to face the bully? Well, first and foremost, you have to start your letter by first acknowledging that you're not alone and that you are surrounded by goodness. There's goodness everywhere you look if you would just look up. If you look up, you'll find the divine is everywhere, never left you. In fact, Jesus says over and over again, you'll find it even here. When you find it here first, you can then open your eyes and see it in others too. And when you get that protest, that takes on some fire. That protest, that movement, that change becomes a very viable, real thing. And nothing stands in its way. What do y'all think? I'm just going to open this up to just a minute or two of questions if you have any so far. We just went over Revelation 1 through 20, which in a Revelation seminar would be like a 2-week process. So you're welcome. Any comments? Anything land for you today that you're like, whoa, or ooh, or whatever?
Why do you think there's such a desire to utilize rather than be open-minded to new capabilities? You grew up when you were
Yeah. I think for what I grew up with, literalizing the Bible is just a thing that people did. When you don't understand it, you begin cherry picking and trying your best to do what you can with the tools you have now. And when you forget to look back and understand the culture, you can get into some really crazy things. In the late 1800s, the interpretations of Revelation were pretty common that you see, especially from like the Ethos-Church. They were pretty common. And so like a lot of what this individual named Ellen White wrote was not anything new, actually. A lot of it was the same, but there were a lot of interpretations taking it very literally. And so understand that like when people began to read and acknowledge that this book was not written in the 20th century, but actually written in the 1st century, that's when everything shifts. And so a lot of theology and historicism has changed and shifted it. But I think when you get a group of people who have believed that you read this book this way and built up most of their theology and their understanding of how to view the world and how the thing ends for so long, shifting is going to be really difficult. And so that's why even sharing this message is kind of scary sometimes, because I'm like, man, I know this is kind of scary to some people, or it shifts things a little bit. It's like, whoa. But yeah, I think fear and just being used to a tradition is what keeps people there, even though most of scholarship is moving away from literalizing the whole thing. Anyone else?
I think this explanation, and I think the more you bring your
yourself away from the traditional explanation. And the purpose from anybody who wrote these things, whether it even be Jesus himself, is to give you the power. You know, most of the time religious institutions want to hold the power, and these stories are projected in a way to keep them in power, you know, and they want you to believe, like, you have to do this, or there's no way you can attain this, or try and figure this out, because whatever, it's all interpretation. But if you look at it this way, even the way you explained it today, and now having that information, and now go back and read it, it all comes back to you. Even the good parts, like heaven is now. Well, yeah, if you see it like that, there's no heaven if you don't see it. Somebody who's depressed or in a system of seeing something a certain way will never see or understand that heaven or goodness is now, unless they actually believe it or take on that responsibility and say, well, who's going to bring me heaven? You know, look to a prophet to tell me, when is heaven coming? Oh, when is Jesus coming back? Where is it? It's up there, it's down here. No, it's up to you to find your own heaven, your own safe place, your own connection to the divine or Christ or whatever. It's up to you, nobody else. You know, nobody's going to save you. Look anywhere in the Bible, nobody's going to save you. It's up to you. It's your responsibility. And I love that not everyone in this room agrees with that. It's kind of fun to watch, though. The beauty is salvation, healing. The word saved, salvation, it meant healing. It meant a thing that you experience. Salvation, you're healed. Are you experiencing healing? If not, you have not been saved, right? It's not I just drank the right Kool-Aid, now I'm in the right place, now I'm saved. And no, that had nothing to do with it. Hold on, let me get Will in first. Yep.
Thanks for sharing all that you blessed with finding out and giving us the opportunity to discuss with each other as well as read and figure out if this is really true based on other pieces of information rather than I have absolute truth.
Right.
Here it is.
Yeah. Please read this on your own. Please read history. Like, read about Nero and Emperor Domitian and all of that. Emperor Domitian, I'll get into a bunch of fun things about, like, the Domitian Games, how big Rome was compared to the city that comes down, what that means. All of that stuff is going to, like, blow your mind. It blew mine. It's so fun. Really? Wow, you weren't allowed to read Revelation. And truth be told, a lot of groups will tell you, read it, but here's how to read it. Like, here's our pamphlets of how to read it. Yeah.
You mentioned before when Steve was speaking that some people disagreeing, and I think I know what that is because I felt it was it made me question something, which is when it was in the verse and it was what he said where heaven is now for what he did, but there's also, I think that conflicts with many people's ideas of what happens after our physical bodies die.
Right.
Isn't there this great place to go to? So to juxtapose those two, well, if the heaven is that, then what happens next? But
Yeah.
there is no other. So I think it's that confusion of, well, can you have both?
I love you, Steve. So good. Yeah.
So it doesn't, I think, because there is, you did point that out, that there clearly said heaven is among us, and then it raises the question.
What happens after death? Yeah. And
I don't think that erases, for me,
right.
that whole thing too. A feeling for heaven for me is not reaching a place that's in the stars or somewhere else. It's a connection, a feeling of happiness. Right now, I may be in heaven because I'm feeling happy, things are good, I'm in a good place, so that's heaven. Doesn't mean
You
that
just
it
had an
can't
anniversary.
continue to another, doesn't mean that it can't continue to another place.
I'm just telling you,
So,
I think that's where the
yeah,
discomfort comes from in many
exactly.
I was like, well, wait a minute, if that's that, then what happened?
Perfect. And I will just say this before we close. Revelation is not going to give any of us an answer of what happens when you die. It was never the intention of the book of Revelation to answer what happens when you die. I know. And oftentimes many of us grew up with that. Well, this is going to be what happens, and this will take place, and then this and this. That was never the intention.
What it does tell us is that we know that God prevails,
Yes.
and that God loves us more than we love ourselves, and that whatever the future holds, it's consistent with God's love for us. Right?
Isn't that beautiful? Imagine if you grew up with, I love you, David. Imagine if you grew up with that. Hey, things are crazy sometimes, and sometimes the world gets a little nuts. But know this, nothing new under the sun. And we will find life again. We always do. We get through it. The divine empowers us, moves us through it, and we make it. And there's life on the other side of it, always. It's beautiful. What if that's how you were told to view that book? I think we'd have so much less baggage. Can you guys come up here and sing? Sweet. Before I say anything that brings the tone down again.
Anyway, how did that resonate to everyone? It's pretty powerful, pretty inspiring. A black book, actually looking at it using a different perspective, a different lens, a different approach. And you know what? That's what life's about. It's about the lens we put on to see things. When we're amongst the storm, how do we walk? Do we walk with grace? Do we walk with bitterness? Do we walk with anger? Or do we walk with love and dignity and self-preservation? And so I believe truly that we all have a choice. It starts here and it ends up here. So every day, I think it's a wonderful choice. And this is what Ethos is about. Ethos represents just that, a place where we belong, we're loved, we're welcome, we're embraced. And with that being said, Ethos sustainability is dependent on all the contributions that we receive here. So if this resonated to you and Ethos means a place that you want to come, please, we ask that you contribute generously. In the tables near you, you will see some envelopes. I would encourage you to please give what you can, and just keep in mind that whatever you give, it will return many times fold. Okay? So do so, and let's enjoy the music and the company. Thank you.
I love this song and the message of there's beauty all around us if you just look. So I hope you enjoy this.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. Ooh, oh, like starlight in the dark, and the smiles can conceal you, and every glimmer is a spark catching fire as you break through. And oh, you're not far away, you're coming close. And oh, even as I wait, you're coming close. You're like summer in the night. The sun goes down, but still I feel you. And every shadow's turning bright, and every broken heart is made new. And oh, you're not far away, you're coming close. And oh, even as I wait, you're coming close. And there's no hard to see, there's no space between you and I, you and I. You are closer than the very oxygen. I breathe you in, oh, I breathe you in. You are God with us, you are here with us, Emmanuel, oh, Emmanuel. You are infinite, your glory has no end, Jesus, Jesus. Oh, there is no end to you. You're here right now. Oh, and there's no hard and seen, there's no space between you and I, oh, you and I. You are closer than the very oxygen. I breathe you in, oh, I breathe you in. You are God with us, you are here with us, Emmanuel, oh, Emmanuel. You are infinite, your glory has no end, Jesus, Jesus. And oh, you're not far away, you're coming close. And oh, even as I wait, you're coming close. You're like starlight in the dark, and the smiles can't conceal you. and every glimmer is a spark, catching fire as you break through.
This next song talks about the goodness of God and how that's our innermost selves. That's our core. At our core, when we reflect Him, it's beautiful. And so this song reminds me of how awesome our divine is, but then also how good it is when we are at our best reflecting Him.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, He is my song. 'Cause you are good. You're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins. Oh, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. 'Cause you are good. You're good. Oh, 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 you're never gonna let me down. Yeah, you're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good. You're good. Oh, 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 you are good. You're good. Oh.
when I was 20-ish, I used to tour and do music. And one of the songs we had was called Thanks, Marianne. And in the middle of the song, there's this moment where I was supposed to say, I'm finding my voice is poetic. I'm finding my voice is, and I screamed. I was supposed to scream, get very loud, strong, the word strong. And I remember when I was doing that song, when we were recording in the studio, when we would come to strong, the most I could get out was strong. Like I couldn't, like, I wasn't taught how to yell. I wasn't able to, like, let it fully out. And so in the studio, I remember them having to take layers and layers of me saying strong in an not strong voice. So every time we would tour and do music out in different places, when that part would come, everyone would have to scream it with me because my voice was not actually strong. So here I am singing about a song about learning to find your voice poetic and strong, and it wasn't strong. And I started to learn something about myself as I wasn't fully there yet, and yet I was singing about it. And so a friend of mine, Kirk, he noticed a couple months ago that I would get really worked up over things. And he said, Tony, you got to stop it. He said, you need to protect that inner child. Because once that inner child, and I know this might sound mystical to some of you, but I don't care. He said that Tony from years and years ago, that little boy, he never was felt to feel safe. And because of that, he was never able to feel strong. And he said, you need to find ways to protect Tony again so that this Tony can be strong and can sing those words loud and ferocious. But little Tony has to feel safe first. And the poem that the song was based on is this. And it's funny because I knew the words, but I never actually let them sink in. And so I'm going to do this right now with you. I'm going to have you close your eyes, and I want you to really listen to the words of this poem. This is by Marianne Williamson. It's one of my favorite pieces, and it's one that I'm learning to live in slowly. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I'm just going to leave you with that. Then I'm going to have Claudia come up, and she's going to do a prayer to close this service today. You can keep your eyes closed if you like.
Anyway, that was beautiful. Thank you. Now, as it is my personal belief in my Heavenly Father and whatever spiritual beliefs you hold dearly, let us all be blessed with receiving the message and teachings that Tony has shared with us, that we take away all that is necessary to live with intention and purpose. Let us spread love, forgiveness, and joy so that we can live abundantly and shine through us so that others can see His glory. Amen. Just want to remind everybody of the social bowling that's going to be taking place. So you can see it up there. And if you're interested, go ahead and RSVP with Christy, and their number is right there. So, speed dollars? Oh, $8. Like speed dollars? Okay. I know. Okay. Okay. So 8 if you have your own shoes and 12 if you don't. And then as a quick reminder, just a really quick, we are going to be making an announcement of we're going to be creating some baskets for New Directions for women that are battling alcohol addiction. So that will be coming up. We're going to be either taking a donation for items, but we'll be making more of those announcements coming shortly. Okay? Thank you.